welcome everyone for another monthly discussion with More Than Walking. This month we're talking about vaccines and people's experience in honor of Vaccine Awareness Month. And hosting the discussion tonight is Corey, who is a hip hop artist from Connecticut. And we have a guest, Teamer, who's a med student here at Yale in New Haven. And I'll let them introduce themselves and we'll get going.
Thank you, Jonathan. My name is Corey Pheez Lee. Jonathan said I'm an aspiring hip hop artist here in Connecticut. I am a C4, C5 quadriplegic. I was hurt June 12th, 2005 in a diving accident, and I'm also a naval veteran.
Hi, everybody. My name is Thaimur Kayani, and I'm a second-year medical student here at the Yale School of Medicine. And really what brings me here is I have ongoing research interests with people from the spinal cord injury community and am seeking ways to help better outcomes for everyone within it.
Hi everyone, my name is Justina Plowden. I am a mother. I have a daughter named Kaylee Elise Plowden. I am also a second-year law student, and I'm attending Dual University in Louisiana. And I have a spinal cord injury. I'm C5, C6 incomplete injury. So.
Awesome. And I'm Jonathan Sigworth. I'm a C7 complete quadriplegic since 2006. And I'm here from Connecticut, and wonderful to see you all. So Corey, take us away.
Awesome, thank you. So, for starters, we're gonna just put it out there. We are by far no professional experts when it comes down to immunizations, but we just hope to have a open and robust discussion and dialogue about Immunization Awareness Month, which happens to be the month of August, and giving awareness to why vaccines are important, and just to fact check maybe some myths out there and maybe to learn something new alongside of what we may not know. So I think for starters, what's the immunization? And, in short form, is basically a type of vaccine that helps in the prevent of a disease from occurring, which is important because vaccines date back, I read somewhere about 1796, an English physician developed and published an article on smallpox. So they've existed for, well over a few hundred years, and bringing attention to it, especially in a climate that we have now with COVID, with so much information, disinformation, views and opinions on it. It's important to just take note and have a discussion about it. So we're going to start off with this question, and this goes for everyone. At what point were you ever vaccine hesitant? And if so, what has changed your mind?
Well, when I was a kid, I didn't like needles. I was never vaccine hesitant. I remember growing up hearing concerns. Certain members of my family have had sensitivity to medications. And so that concern of getting too much all at once as a young baby, so that's kind of circulated in my family. I haven't had that concern myself. But I also haven't had to face it. I'm not a parent. I don't have kids, so I've never had to ask that question. And so I guess I can relate to that concern the most, but other than that, not really.
I would say from my own experience, so I grew up being the child of physicians. So I think that for us, vaccinations were, very well described to us, and we had, we were fortunate enough to have that fountain of knowledge in the home to educate us on how to care for ourselves, what things are important to do. And I still was upset about it because I also didn't like needles. They're big, they're scary, they hurt. But I also remember talking quite a bit with friends and hearing their parents have concerns. I didn't have many. I actually don't know if I had any friends who were part of specifically the anti-vaccination community, but I definitely heard a lot of concerns about vaccinations. And I think there are a lot of people who wanted to live life the more natural way of letting their kids, get a virus instead of getting immunized for it, and hearing differences in philosophy. So I was exposed to it, but I can't say I directly felt those feelings.
For me, I can't ever say that I was necessarily hesitant. I kind of just went with the flow of things. Every year that tetanus shot, you got the pain in your arm and it's sore for a few days, not realizing the impact it's supposed to actually have. Should I get a cat, claw my finger or something? This is to help prevent like the spread of, tetanus and other diseases. I do remember at one point thinking about not getting the flu vaccine because then it started swirling around in my head like, hey, you get the vaccine and you get sick. And so then there's a culture of individuals for me that were like, hey, every time I've gotten it, I've gotten ill from it. So I think one year I didn't, but then afterwards I said, well, I'm in a vulnerable population and I don't want to have to battle sicknesses. They suck when I was walking, and therefore if it sucked when I was walking, I for sure don't want to have to deal with it now. So for me, every opportunity I have that I'm able to be vaccinated to just prepare not only for myself but for my family as well. I try to take the opportunity to get vaccinated. You get the vaccine and you get sick, and so then there's a culture of individuals for me that were like, hey, every time I've gotten it, I've gotten ill from it. So I think one year I didn't, but then afterwards I said, well, I'm in a vulnerable population and I don't want to have to battle sicknesses. They suck when I was walking, and therefore if it sucked when I was walking, I for sure don't want to have to deal with it now. So for me, every opportunity I have that I'm able to be vaccinated to just prepare not only for myself but for my family as well. I try to take the opportunity to get vaccinated. Hey, Alexia.
Okay, I'm here. I'm Alexia Bookums. I'm a T9 complete injury from 27 years ago, and I was not hesitant about the vaccine at all. I've got a few degrees in public health, so I think that I'm delighted to see what's going on because it's an incredible display of reactions to good public health issues. Have you all gotten vaccines?
Yes.
I haven't gotten my booster yet.
Yeah.
My sister got hers today because she's immunocompromised.
Oh, okay.
Well, I can't get mine yet.
I was vaccinated January 20th, got my first dose, and then February 8th, I got my second dose.
That's about the time I got mine.
Awesome.
Right 2 days after I got my second dose, I had terrible pain in my right arm and a huge hematoma just above my right elbow. And I didn't know where it came from. Turns out the muscle that goes across my right shoulder that lifts my arm up, the tendon, which is located down by my elbow, got ripped off.
Wow.
Coincidence. But I'm right-handed and I'm pretty non-functional now.
Very sorry to hear that.
And I saw a couple of orthopedists and they said, well, you've got pretty good strength in your hands. You're fine the way you are. But I was used to bench pressing 185 pounds and I'm 105 pounds. I used to be a monster of sorts.
Wow. I love it. But like you said, that wasn't due to the vaccine though.
I don't believe so. Yeah, no. It was just one of those coinkydinks.
Right. So, that's interesting because, for Jonathan, it was a little bit of a fear, but not too much hesitancy behind it. Tamara, you grew up with a culture of people saying, "Look, here are the facts," and what have you. And for Alexia, you're like, "Listen, I work in this field, I understand it," and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. So it seems that most of us can agree that none of us have been truly vaccine hesitant, and currently what we see right now is being a good thing. But I want to pose this question to you, Alexia, because you worked in this field, right? Now we have so many people quarreling, right? We between wear the mask, don't wear the mask, social distance, get back into school, get to work, open up, this and that and the third. Um, and it causes a lot of strife, right? So, as a person who has worked in that field, how do you view the role of public health and public safety in our daily life and in your daily life?
I think it's essential. I'm a dentist as well as degrees in public health. And I got my dental degree first. And then when I went to school for public health, people were telling me, oh, that's play stuff. That's not serious medicine. But I'm so glad that public health is getting some respect now. It's COVID vaccine and the COVID crisis.
So, how would you define public health?
Health for the masses and things about interacting with other people.
How about yourself, Tamara?
I think it's essential because there are so many cases in the history of society where in England, where they found out that people were getting infected from the water supplies, the early 1900s in England, because the water was contaminated. And that was a huge issue with public health. And we grew up, I think most of us are within the same age range, that you got vaccines. And school said you have to have vaccines to go to school.
Right.
And it's made such a huge difference in the health status of the population.
Tamara, how about yourself?
I would say that, if I were to define public health, so Alexia, as I don't know if you were here for my introduction. I'm a second year medical student at the Yale School of Medicine. So, and now, because of this pandemic, I'm really interested in doing a dual degree in getting a degree in public health during my 5th year.
Do it. Don't waste. Don't think about it. Just do it.
Absolutely. So I guess if I were to have to say what public health is, I believe that public health is this idea of both encouraging and protecting the health of not just you, not just your people, not just your community, but all communities, those who you may not even know. I believe that is really where public health lies. Is public health is this sense of social responsibility to caring for the betterment of physical, emotional, and spiritual health across all communities, all boundaries. That's how I would define it.
Brilliantly said. Brilliantly said. You got it all. Really. That's public health is so broad, and it's got a bad reputation, and that's unfortunate. But it's when you think about the smallpox and polio and all of those things, those were all big public health issues. And it's made such a huge difference. That's why our life expectancy has increased so much as a population, because of public health issues.
That's a very good point. Life expectancy, that has very much increased over the past, few hundred years. That's an interesting point.
Because you're affecting people at a young age.
Right.
You're not helping people who are in their 80s or 90s from dying younger. You're getting kids to live a longer life.
How about yourself, Jonathan?
I think the emphasis on those communities who you don't even know about, I think is key, because it's a responsibility, not even for your neighbor, but for the neighbor you don't know. It's a responsibility that is limitless, and that's a big responsibility. Trying to think, what are all the possible ways that my actions might affect someone who I come in contact with?
I can't help but bring in my favorite background in dentistry. That putting fluoride in the water has basically put dentists out of business. I grew up. My dad was a dentist, and so I grew up, and I'm Silver City. But my kids never had cavities because they had fluoride in the water. Not because I got them to clean their teeth better. I mean, I did my best to try, but it's because of fluoride.
Mm.
And that was the huge that's had a huge impact on quality of life.
What I hear from everybody is there's kind of like an unspoken standard for public health. I think we all have some level of decorum when it comes down to how we keep and how we present ourselves, because we're always doing something that revolves kind of around, I think, that sector. Like, take for instance, with you having a background in dentistry, the first thing that I see the dentist do once I lay back is they put on goggles, they put on a mask, they even have a face shield,
Yeah.
because you're dealing with saliva, sputum, and you're digging into somebody's teeth because you're cleaning them. So you're naturally doing that, and you're sitting there immobile for the most part for a good 40 minutes or so. It's grueling and agonizing, but you know that what you're doing is for the protection of yourself. A lot of people don't realize that, when you look at a person's teeth, it can also relate to heart issues as well. And so because you have that correlation, your standard is to take care of yourself. And I think what we have to learn to do from a societal standpoint is, when we view public health, that there should be like a baseline standard for all of us to be willing to communicate on. And that way, that kind of like just, it doesn't divide us as much as it can unite us. What are other everyday public safety or public health measures do we interact with without causing or creating like any type of political division? And one of the first things I think about was the conflict with certain politicians saying, showing your paperwork is like slaves having to present free paperwork, or Jews being able to travel and you have to display paperwork. But the irony in all of that is life revolves around paperwork. You have to identify yourself virtually everywhere you go. First, you get pulled over. First thing they want to say is license and registration. It's paperwork. You have to show credentials in order to validate yourself. That is the bar. And that's the minimum standard. Or if you drive past a police officer, he pulls you over, you're not wearing your safety belt, he's thinking about you. He's not thinking about himself. And I think we kind of get divided because I think we're getting to a place where we don't feel like people are thinking about us, that they're really concerned. This is not red or blue or whichever state you're a part of. This is more about the standard of living that is essential for all of us as people to thrive. But, anybody feel free to jump in. What are some of the typical everyday run-of-the-mill safety precautions, if you will, that you take part in every day and it does not cause any strife?
I think to go off of what you were mentioning, Corey, is actually seatbelts. So that is one where I don't know, they've been installed for so long that most people probably don't have memory of when it didn't exist or when people were hesitant about it. But my family's from Pakistan. And in Pakistan, very few people wear seatbelts. And if you tell people to wear seatbelts, they will get upset with you because they believe that they want to be able to exit their cars quickly if an emergency happens, because they do over there. Sometimes can be a little bit less safe. They want that ease of use. And there's a lot of hesitancy there. And that is something that we step into cars every day and we buckle our seatbelts because we know it will protect us. Similarly, a vaccine is given to you to protect you and the others around you, but really it is meant to protect you.
I think I always revert back to my dental background. My dad was a dentist, and on every Sunday after church, we'd go and clean his office. There was no concept of an office cleaner in that day and age. And so I learned the basics. And then when his office assistant was out, I would help. So when I got to dental school, I'd been exposed to the sights and sounds and smells of dentistry. So that was all second nature to me. And it made it a lot easier for me to go through, to whiz through dental school. And even though I haven't practiced dentistry in years, if anyone asks me what I do, I'm a dentist. It's like a characteristic you can't get rid of. Your oral cavity is how you speak, how you nourish yourself. Even though it's a specialty of the field of medicine, it's critical to so many things. It's how you eat, it's how you talk, it's how you present yourself.
Mm.
Hopefully I can make a difference when I speak to some people who see the value of that.
And I like what you said, that you basically had an example that was being set before you in your father, to be able to bring his children, because he sees the value in public health and public safety. I think that's another part that's missing, is how do we value one another in all of this? You know, right now, this is the biggest health crisis that we have kind of gone through, I think, right now, as on a global scale, like maybe since, I don't know, the plague, the way that it has affected everyone's livelihood.
1918.
That as well. But I like the fact that, like, we're talking about these examples, right? Like, you know, Thamira, you had your parents, you had your father, Jonathan, you had people in your life. I know for me, like, you know, my dad, he worked in custodial services, right? And so he's constantly cleaning up after people all the time. Like, you know, he's a waste not, want not type of person. And I observed that those late nights coming home, where it's like what you're doing is a public service, because it's a necessity, where one man's trash is seen, another one sees treasure, right? And so I think we need to understand value as we interact with each other. But how about yourself, Jonathan? Like, when you think about public safety and the measures that we take in comparison, how kind of like honed in and focused on those same type of measures, how do you see those same public measures?
Well, I was just reminded of one. I mean, typically it's like, what, speeding limits, right?
Yeah.
That I think of. But Justina Plowden, who's just on the call, she's dropping in and out because she's in Louisiana right now, and they're having a storm. And I think there's another hurricane headed that way.
Wow.
And we had a hurricane recently heading up towards Connecticut, and there's earthquakes in Haiti. I mean, you think of natural disasters where hundreds to thousands of people die in short amount of time, and it's very visible, right? You can see it in photos. And when any of those disasters happen, everyone asks, where was the government? Where was public safety? Where were the announcements blaring on the loudspeakers in the neighborhoods, telling people to stay inside or get in your basement or restrict your freedom for the sake of your life and the life of the rescuers, you know? Those are very visible situations. But it's a lot harder, I think, to translate that feeling to where it's a pandemic and you're not seeing all the people in the hospital rooms.
Right.
You know, you're not seeing those pictures. And so I think just remembering that a pandemic is almost like a man-made hurricane, in a sense, is that we're the wind. I recently read a book called The Last Hermit, I think. I may have the book title wrong. But this guy up in Maine, Christopher Knight, he remained completely socially isolated in the woods of Maine for like 20 years. And he never got sick.
Wow.
He never got sick because he never
isolated.
interacted. Sickness requires contact with other people. And that was just really interesting thing to remember, that when we talk about public health, it's all about our interactions with each other.
Yeah, I think what you said was very, very very poignant. I think the idea of what do we consider a crisis and how we apply that. Like, so tragedies are universal, right? Like it has this domino effect, and if one piece gets knocked, then the rest of the structure then collapses. So as far as going back to public measures, yeah, you're right. When oftentimes when storms happen, whether it's in the South and somewhere like Louisiana or Florida, or it's a snowstorm or some type of mudslide or forest fire taking place, it's always the same central message. Hey, get out while you can. This is your warning, right? This is essentially your mask, right? Get out while you can. Well, it's not going to be that bad. I don't think it's going to be as rough as they say it is. They're overplaying it. They're overshooting it and what have you, because you may have lived through it before. But then the tides can always turn, right? And like we have COVID, and everybody was worried about COVID-19, but then, the warning was always there. The variant could happen. Things can change. It's a fluid situation. It's not concrete. We don't have a vaccine as of yet, but here are the precautions. But in doing so with all those precautions, people forget those situations where a lot of those first responders had to go into those neighborhoods in Louisiana on rafts and boats and get boats off of their rooftops. So then now you're endangering other people. And that's a sign of, to some degree, a bit of overconfidence in our ability to tackle certain situations, especially alone. And I think that in all of this, when we think about the public measures that we can all take, is that in none of this we're doing alone, which kind of like brings me to our next set of questions. And Thamira, please tap in, because this is your expertise. So let's talk about efficacy when it comes down to vaccines, not just COVID, but any type of vaccine, right?
Corey, could I?
Sure, go ahead.
Before we jump into that, I just wanted to share one last thought on this point.
Yep, go ahead.
So one of our volunteers, Carolyn Boyles, she couldn't join us today, but she wrote in and she said that both he and her husband have decided not to take the vaccine, primarily because of their religious beliefs, and they're anti-abortion, and they believe, and they've heard, that the vaccine is made from aborted fetus embryos. And so that's what they believe. And that's what's motivating them to not take the vaccine. And it's interesting because they've had COVID and they're going through the recovery of that. But I want to bring their story up because there's, a lot of people aren't taking the vaccine not because they don't care about their neighbor. In this case, they're very much anti-abortion. They care about unborn babies. So in their mind, in a lot of people's mind, what some would call a conspiracy theory, they believe is a campaign for human rights, for something. And I think that's where the understanding the science and really tackling those myths is so important, because it's not like people are believing there's no hurricane. It's just we have to agree on the same hurricane, and not be fighting each other and get caught outside in the wind in the process.
I completely agree with that, and I think the point is valid about the information that's being poured in, and that goes back to question one about hesitancy. Like, is it culture, fear? Is it religion? Is it not enough information being passed down? And I think this is place where I think America kind of enlightened us a little bit on it about the efficacy and safety of vaccines as far as what you've seen since you've been inside of the medical field. So like maybe speak to Carolyn fear about the aborted fetuses, what can you tell us, maybe some facts to help us understand what the process is.
So just as a disclaimer, so I heard of this question about 45 minutes ago, did a little bit of research with it. But basically here's what I can clarify. So one thing is that within these vaccines, there's no literal fetal cell in the vaccine that you're injecting into your body. These are at least Pfizer and Moderna are mRNA vaccines, meaning they have the genetic code that codes for the COVID antigen. So the way that COVID spreads throughout your body, it basically mimics that and trains your body to respond to COVID when it would see it, but it doesn't actually inject COVID into you. It doesn't inject a live cell line into you. That's not how this vaccine operates. In terms of what they're referencing of a fetal cell line being used in the development of vaccines, that is true that there are cell lines for every vaccine, for every drug. Any scientific innovation you could think of has a pipeline where they need to graduate from the concept to animal testing, to human cell testing, to live human testing. And that is in the shampoo we use, in a lot of the food we eat, and a lot of the things that surround our lives. So I do believe that it's hard to just isolate your opinions on the COVID vaccine to that when our vaccinations for varicella, rubella, hepatitis A, a lot of the vaccines that allow us to live past age 35 or so are predicated on the usage of a fetal cell line that did originate in the 60s from elective abortions, but are not continually fed. Like these are immortalized cell lines that are used for testing and development. They're not incorporated into a vaccine, but we need human cells to test, and those have to be obtained by some human. And there are some ethical dilemmas with the human cell lines that exist for everything. And I can speak on that as someone who's done a lot of cellular research, tissue culturing, and all of that in between. So I've worked with some of these cell lines, not the ones used in COVID, but similar vein. And to kind of extend off of the ethical dilemma that these people are voicing, and I'm very happy they voiced it because I'm sure that they're not the only ones who feel this way. So I looked it up, and so the Vatican has actually come out and encouraged people to get the COVID vaccine. And saying that without alternatives present for the betterment of our communities, for our own individual health and our collective health, that one should get vaccinated. So I hope that can help battle some of the qualms they're having, knowing that they're not injecting live aborted cells into them, and that religious institutions, or at least one of the biggest ones, the head of it, has come in support of COVID, can help reshape opinions on this dilemma.
That was very well
said.
said and well placed. I think that's why it's healthy to have this type of discussion. Is we have to quell fears, because even beyond that, I think most people are hesitant because they just feel like they don't know enough. And we're at the preliminary stages. We're at the beginning of it. We can look back, and I heard I think she was a nurse. She said that many people alive today who are alive during the time of polio would not be alive had the vaccine had not come through, right? And so when you think about that perspective, and even within the last 10 years, CDC says that due to the increase in vaccination, that children born within the last 20 years, they can possibly save like 21 million from like severe disease, and about 732,000 deaths can be prevented just alone in the last 20 years due to development of vaccines, and like the mayor said, they go through a rigorous testing process before they can even make it to the main stage. I mean, we're just still having trouble, approving the ones that we have used for wide general usage. So it seems like the efficacy is there in terms of safety, but there are some associated risks involved with taking vaccines. And I know, Jonathan, you spoke about that earlier. There's like maybe mild irritation to that effect. I don't know if it was a family member. I don't know if it were you, and even you, Alexia, may chime in when you guys took the COVID vaccine, and if you've done it as well. Did you guys have any like type of side effects as a result when we compare risk versus reward?
Yeah, no, I didn't experience anything other than just a sore arm, and I got vaccinated when back in, I don't remember when now. April, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, so with my first COVID vaccine, so I got Moderna. I got that in, I think, January 6th was my first dose. That felt pretty fine. A little bit of an arm soreness. Everything was good after that. My second dose, I did feel I had to take time off I had to skip school the next day, but not in the good way. Not like when I was a kid.
No, understandable.
But I did get a pretty bad headache, some fatigue, some nausea. So I do think that, those are complications that can happen from a vaccine. And still, at the end of the day, I would do it again in a heartbeat. I'm excited to get my booster whenever that's available. I think that these are things that, to me, it's in great peace of mind to know that, I believe the newest CDC guidelines are, I'm 29 times less likely to be hospitalized with that vaccine, which, there's just the benefits of it outweigh that temporary moment of not feeling so great.
I agree.
In fact, you don't feel so great, maybe that your body's putting up a good reaction, creating the reaction to the virus, so that you will be protected.
Yeah, very true. It is in a lot of ways telling you that your immune system's operating the way it should.
Going to work. It's been laying around late for too long.
You know what? Not to cut you off, Alexia. I just wanted to try to get Justina in.
Yes,
because I see that she just popped up. I know you battling something down there, so prayers up for you. Right now, we're talking about the vaccine, the risk versus the rewards with taking the COVID vaccination, and if you'd like to share with us maybe your experience if you are vaccinated, and even speak to if you were hesitant to do it, if you are currently hesitant about it.
Honestly, a lot of people that I love and I know have had COVID. Some survived, and recently a lot of them have passed. And a lot of them are currently battling COVID. And I'm praying for them all. And my thoughts at this,
I think we might have lost that feed again. All right. Well, while we're waiting on her, pass it off to you, Alexia. What has been your experience with the COVID vaccine, risk versus reward?
I was absolutely delighted to get it. When I went to get it, I went to the, right near me, about a mile down the road, is the University of Connecticut Medical School and Dental School. Mm-hmm. And that's where they gave the vaccine. And I went in by myself, and they said, "Are you alone?" I said, "Yeah, is there something wrong with that?" I drive myself, I go places. And it was like they didn't expect me. They expected me to have a cohort of people taking care of me to come in because I use a wheelchair.
Yeah, that typically, was having that conversation, I think last month or so, just like how people kind of observe folks in wheelchairs being accompanied by people. But it sounds like you're just basically enthusiastic about it because you recognize the validity, the importance of it. You're ready to go. You're like, you brought your cat with you. You're just like, well, we are ready to go. I'm going to get this regardless, because you what it is. I mean, it was horrible. I think at the height, 5,000 people a day. That is tough to swallow. I crunched some numbers prior to this, and they say that since 2010, influenza kills between 12 and 61,000 people. If you multiply that, even at its height, you get the number that died in the past year. So it really, I don't think anybody can paint a clearer picture than what is actually occurring. And just like Justina said, she said she's in Louisiana, which is a state that's virtually is in crimson at times due to COVID, about how powerful this is. Like, we know, yes, coronavirus has existed, as Carolyn talked about. And no, we cannot be immune to every single disease out there. However, we can build guards up to help protect not only the vulnerable, but all of us, because I can be vulnerable and be fine because I took my vaccine, but then if my caregiver doesn't take his, then guess what? I'm out of a caregiver, and he's just as healthy as the next person. So again, it goes back to that domino effect. But I want to try to touch on something because I know we're going to be pressed for time a little bit. Thamira, you said your family's from Pakistan, right? And global access to vaccines are very, very important. I have family in Jamaica. I have a cousin who works in infectious diseases, right? And so, I know with Jonathan, his wife's from Colombia, so that we have this like outside of the United States perspective. How do you guys feel about the overproduction of the vaccine, and if it's being overproduced, should there be a better way to distribute it to other countries who are in need? And I'll let Jonathan let you take that if you like.
Yeah, well, I'm a big supporter of getting rid of vaccine patents. I think vaccine patents are ridiculous, and arguments that you need patents to make medications profitable and to fund the research, I think, is a bunch of BS. We can absolutely fund research on life-saving medications when there's a pandemic raging and it's destroying economies, et cetera. We save so much money by not destroying our economies. So that, I think that's the way to go, to make production everywhere possible and in whatever means. And about the access, yeah, it gets me so frustrated. I think we can also start taking the vaccine doses that people are refusing and ship them overseas immediately. I think would be a valuable thing to do.
That is putting it mildly.
But
I love that, though.
That is a rash feeling for me, because I get angry, but as my friend Carolyn, who's not wanting to take it, I understand that, you can't just paint people badly who don't take it, but that's my gut feeling, is like, there's so many people who need it, and it's very painful to see good, well-meaning people contribute to that inequality for something that's so important.
My daughter's been in New Zealand, which has been COVID-free. And she calls and she says, "But Mom, it's just normal here. There's nothing going on." Well, they've gotten some infections and they've gone down into such a severe lockdown. She can't leave her apartment. I mean, the government has just taken such strong measures because they appreciated how nice it was to be COVID-free. And now that COVID's gotten back in the country, they're going to keep it out.
There's a lot of irony and contradiction between everything that's going on, right? Like, on one hand, people are looking for somebody to blame, right? There was all this, why isn't there being something to treat this? I remember seeing like TikTok videos, like, look what's on the back of this bleach bottle kills coronavirus. Why aren't we doing this? We obviously had the president make comments about trying to infuse that into like one's bloodstream to kind of eradicate disease, which feeds into the misinformation. But global accessibility is important. And Justine is back, so we're going to let you chime back in. Right now, we're talking about global access to the vaccine, but please finish your point right before you got cut off.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was saying I lost a lot of friends this year from COVID. I have been under the doctor's orders for a while now because I had an injury to my arm.
Okay.
But unfortunately, I was never exposed to it. I've never tested positive for it, me or my daughter or any of other family members. I do wear a mask. I have not yet taken the vaccine, but I do. I have read about it. I've read about all three of them. I am more than likely. I'm really thinking about the Pfizer vaccine.
Okay.
It never was not out of my mind because that's something certainly help us get better and make if there's a positive through all the deaths and all the hurting and everything else. If that's making a big, but I'm not. I've seen some of the things people are saying, and I've seen the positive note. I've seen so much. I say have experienced so much more than anything I think right now. But I am looking into it. I'm reading more about it. That's my hope is I have especially my incomplete higher level injury, especially being a spinal cord injury. We are way more, exposed and we're more prone to catch it.
Right.
Everyone knows it. So, and I've been blessed. I can't say I've been lucky because I've been literally blessed to be one of the few people who I can still do and go about doing my everyday routines and go and kind of still get out and do everyday lifestyle things that I have to do with me, my daughter, my family, and be okay. And I don't speak too fast because it happens literally that fast. People I've known I could have just spoke to 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That fast.
So do you oh no, she got cut out. Man, that was good stuff though. That was good stuff, getting those other perspectives about it. And we haven't really touched on it too much, but I and Tamara was talking about it like prior to we got on the call. And for people of color, we're not used to access. There's one thing about global access, right? But even in our own backyard, we've been kind of, pushed to the sideline. And we can go back to things like the Tuskegee experiment, talked about Henrietta Lacks, these contributions to medical breakthroughs, even, one of the most notable OBGYNs was testing on slaves, right? Slave girls, 17-year-olds, 15-year-olds, right? So there's a history of trying to figure out if we're going to make it accessible, who then gets it first? And I know for me, one of the things that, and I think about it now with the hesitancy question was, I was like, man, the first thing they said was, hey, we're going to get it to communities of color. We're going to get it to people who are disabled. We're going to help them out. I'm like, oh, no, man, I'm not going to be, I'm not your guinea pig, man. I'm not on the hamster wheel. We're not doing that today. So there was an inherent fear that came on myself and my wife and some of my family members because we know that there's a history. So while access is good, I think in terms of how we roll it out to people, we just have to have an understanding that it is for the purpose of having all of us healed and all of us behind the wall instead of on the other side of the defense. So I think that's important to note. So I think like what we've covered so far is, immunizing is generally safe in protecting people from spreading infectious diseases, but the term safe requires proof for people to feel secure. How can we, especially in the disability community, feel safer and more confident to take vaccines when essentially they are rolled out?
I think it's important for us to always remember that vaccines are not a cure-all. I think if we can understand that the purpose of a vaccine is not just to 100% protect ourselves, the way it protects the community is that it prevents the virus from staying alive in a large amount. The reason why that's so important is because if it stays alive in a large amount, it's going to continue to evolve like every other living organism on this planet. And that's how we have the Delta variant. The Delta variant is not the last variant that we're going to see.
Right.
If the Delta variant stays alive in large amounts, we're gonna get to the, I don't know what the next number is, but it's gonna be a whole lot worse. And so I think the way we feel safe by taking the vaccine is recognizing that we're doing our public health duty in protecting each other as much as we can now, but even more so, we're doing our duty to protect ourselves and our whole families in the future, because who knows, the coronavirus could stick around. I watched Z Wars, is that what it's called? About the zombie apocalypse.
Yep.
That can happen. I mean, so I think if we could just have the humility to put ourselves in the context of not just now, not just for our own health, but put ourselves in the context of history looking forward, we're doing our duty by taking the vaccine.
The fact that if you did a cost-benefit ratio and looked at what the costs of not getting a vaccine are, compared to the benefits you get from it, and the risks associated with it, it balances out that it's a positive thing to do.
I think that the struggle with this topic is, like many things nowadays, it's becoming, factual science is becoming heavily politicized. And when science gets rooted in dogma, you can't argue dogma with science. I can tell people the prevalence rates, the likelihood of, the odds ratio, whatever statistical measure you want to use to argue the pros of getting vaccinated and the cons of being unvaccinated. From my experience, it's reached a point where that's no longer a productive conversation, because it's not a conversation. It ends up being a one-sided form of interaction. So I think that for combating fears against the vaccine, I think one thing that I think health professionals need to strive to do is remove our own sense of stigma to those here who are fearful, because it won't get us anywhere. It's this idea that people have reasons, whether they're valid scientifically, which most of them are not, of why they don't want to take the vaccine. It's a genuine issue for them. And so I think having an opportunity to have a discussion and not just a debate is necessary, because we've right now formed an almost unbridgeable gap between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated communities for the most part. And in order to bridge that, we need to have a space where people can just communicate, where a health professional or someone who's vaccinated within the community can go out to people who are unvaccinated and just have a non-judgmental conversation. I know I have been working with some efforts within the Muslim community to try and see, can we get imams and people who are trusted within the community to have discussions with people who are scared of this vaccine, to have people who we consider friends to have these discussions. And I think that to me seems like a more viable path forwards than just rooting myself in the numerical benefits of it, because I think that people today who are choosing not to get vaccinated, now it could vary, but I think for a lot of people, it doesn't matter what the cost benefit ratio is. They have their mindset and they need a different approach.
Yeah,
the president got COVID and he survived, but only because they spent so many thousands of dollars keeping him alive. Your average Joe can't afford that. They don't have access to that.
and I think that's the I think that's the larger picture, right? Because most people move when their bottom line is affected, right? So when you are directly impacted by it, then it starts to make a little bit more sense to you. Like I was telling Jonathan, I never had a problem getting large gloves from the VA. Like it's like a no-brainer. I'm gonna call, get my supplies, and they order. And the next thing you know, it's like there's a back order on large gloves. But why is that? Well, that's due to hospitalization. That's due to so many people in the nursing field that not just in the VA, but it's all around the world. It's a global supply chain, right? So though this is not something monetary, it's a commodity. I mean, I know you guys recall the fighting over tissue, like toilet tissue. It was rough for like a good stretch of 3 months. You couldn't go in there. You couldn't find toilet tissue, paper towels. Lord knows you were not going to find any bleach wipes or any sprays, because that became the commodity, right? Because that was the thing that we all could agree upon that had such value.
Well, I think you're bringing us to the question of like the knock-on effect, and I think that also relates to the other question of how do we help people rethink what they've already decided on. Is I think understanding the real effects of our current actions on others, of our inaction, and being able to see it and understand it and connect the dots.
Yeah, so I've been having an issue with my hospital bed. It does not raise up, nor does it go down. And typically a repair like this happens very, very quickly. But because it's taken so long, I noticed that it's kind of due to the chain reaction of the pandemic, right? There's a higher demand to repair durable medical equipment, and thus it puts other people at a disadvantage. Whereas you normally would be able to, like, kind of like when the gas crisis has happened, and you typically go up to the pump, put 20 on one, and then you're gone. But then when that slows down, what happens? You get longer lines, and then tanks aren't being able to be filled. And so the global supply chain has been less affected. And I know in my situation, and it didn't even get repaired today, which is a sad part. It went up, it don't go down. And now I'm stuck with it being in the up position, which I kind of prefer. But at the same token, now it's again, I have to wait. And I don't know how long that's going to be, because I know the severity of what's happening, both locally and globally. And so because COVID has affected us in some different form or fashion, and we know that there's great division amongst party lines, because of this division, because it's affecting everyone, what is our response as humanity to protecting each other from global pandemics, diseases, outbreaks of any kind? If we are trying to line ourselves up and say, okay, we have the vaccine now, let's try to take it. People are saying, no, I reject it. Well, okay, let's wear masks then, to protect us. No, unmask us, unmask our children. All right, well, let's social distance. No, I want to be able to go to this restaurant free and clear. What is our responsibility to how we are to approach Christ?
I think the answer that I think a lot of, at least Americans, don't want to hear is the practice of social responsibility in some way requires relinquishing some of your individual freedom to do whatever you want. Because that inherently is what social responsibility is, right? It's doing what is best for everybody. not necessarily what's most convenient for you or me. Um, and I think that it's interesting because the US has a uniquely American dilemma where the mask policy or vaccination ideas uh, almost are seen as an attack on individual freedom and a sense of liberty, um, which is really sad to see. And I really don't see the logic in it. If you have leaders in office who actively support public health policy, I think that will go a long way in promoting systemic reactions to crises.
My response is, okay, well, get COVID and then see what life is like. This is a simple way for you to prevent yourself from getting sick. And if you don't want to do that, then it's your responsibility to deal with COVID if it gets you. I was delighted to have the masks in the winter when it was so cold outside, kept my face warm. My
Yeah.
glasses fogged up, but my face wasn't freezing all the time. They looked at the incidence of general colds and flus, that's gone down significantly since everyone's had masks on.
Oh, definitely. My dad had a cold the other day, and I was like, Dad, don't come around here without a mask. If it works for COVID, it'll work for that. And I don't know why we haven't done that before. It would save me a lot of pain and suffering.
Mm.
But no, I think, well, to quickly speak to Alexia's point about go ahead and get COVID, the problem with that is that even if, you get COVID, that's going to make you an agent to pass that on to other people. Even if you get vaccinated and you go out and you interact face to face with someone who has COVID, you can carry that COVID in your nose and give it to someone else. So the stakes are super high in terms of what is our responsibility. And I think the whole idea of American freedom, as Timur was talking about, is that a lot of us have forgotten that freedom is not free. And, Corey, you can speak of this being a veteran. The American concept of freedom is kind of couched in we can do what we want and we are like the strongest military power on earth, right? And we often forget that in order to maintain that, we have to make sacrifices. We have to have duty, and duty and sacrifice doesn't belong to these foreign concepts held by communist governments that are anti-individualistic, etc. It's part of our everyday life, but we need to apply those concepts that we hold dear in patriotism, but we have to apply that to ourselves.
Yeah.
Otherwise, who are we? We're living in anarchy. If we're not looking out for each other.
This has very much been a demonstration of Jenga, right? Like you pull and strip away your, civic duty at its base level, the structure just does not hold in place. It's not intact. No matter what you do, it can balance for a little while, but eventually it's going to collapse. And what I have great disagreement with is using certain factors that just don't equate with one another to represent your view. It's not factual. It just isn't. Like, if you showed me a better way to deal with something that does not cause harm, I'll do it. That's fine. But if you don't have an alternative, and if you have experienced COVID and your heart is still hardened and you're still like, no to masks, no to vaccines, don't listen to the CDC or the FDA, then I have to question, how much power should I be giving you as an elected official? How much should I be able to allow my children to look up to you? I mean, I think it was today with Governor Lamont, he was getting like cussed out by people, unmask us. And it's like, look, man, like I can do that, but then at the end of the day, how many times have you seen countless individuals who catch COVID are now intubated and then come on national TV and tell you, you don't want this. This is not for you. I am so sorry. I hope to make it out of this. And it brings a sense of, you know what? I'm in a chair. I'm a quad, so I don't have usage of my arms. I have to wear a mask and I have to drive my chair. It's not an easy balancing act, but I do it because the precautions outweigh my sense of liberty. You're right, it comes at a cost to be free. From every war that has ever been waged, men and women and children have died to progress some type of agenda. And over 600,000 people last year who passed away who did not they didn't even have an option for a vaccine. And I know right now, if they could see it right now, all they would say is, oh, go get it, man. Go get it. I don't know what you're waiting for. Because you don't want to end up here. I lost a loved one late last year. You know, a friend of mine lost his mom due to COVID. 3 friends with the same name all ended up having COVID. So, though my struggle with it pertains to things that happened in yesteryears, I have to think I have a current generation that I have to allow to live. And should my kids get it, then what do I say to them? If they say, well, Dad, you told us not to mask up. You didn't. You told us not to do this. What is my apology then? So I think everybody has a responsibility to, again, like I said earlier, meet the standard. And the standard at this point, if you can't give an alternative, you need to just follow suit at this point. And, you know, I really think that's where it lands squarely on is it's not about you or I, it's about the collectively.
Having just limitations in what my body can do has made me more thankful for what I can do. And I appreciate every little bit that I can do.
What comes with limited freedom is creativity. So you know, that's something we can help remind people of as well. Yeah, being in lockdown is kind of like living with a disability, man. You just got to figure out what you can do with what you got.
That's a fact. I just had some notes that I took. This is what I gathered from everybody. Life expectancy has increased due to public health understanding. I think that's a positive for being immunized. Humanity has always had standards. Cleanliness is vital and it's valuable. Tragedy is universal. So from one pandemic to another, to one storm, to another forest fire, we can all see that there is a sense of need in want. Access is for everyone, and urgency should not be bargained with. So when it comes down to healthcare, we need to all have access to it. Public health is a civic duty, which requires giving up some liberties, as we talked about. Maybe to solve things, do a cost analysis of how much does it cost when disease hits community. Leadership is important, and through this discussion, we don't dismiss, but we strive to understand our differences.